Ethan Parker never believed in the supernatural. Ghost stories, haunted objects, curses. It all sounded like fiction made to scare kids or sell horror movies. As a practical app developer living alone in a quiet suburb of Oregon, his life was filled with logic, routine, and accompanying hum of computer fans. But that all changed the day he walked into an estate sale on the outskirts of town. The home belonged to a recently deceased woman named Lydia Mercer. She'd lived alone, rarely seen by neighbors, and rumors swirled about her being involved in strange rituals or spiritual practices. Ethan didn't care about any of that. He was there for antique furniture, maybe a rare bookshelf or a quirky desk. But then he saw the painting. It wasn't even displayed properly. It was leaning against a fireplace, partially covered by a red velvet cloth. Something about it drew him in. He pulled the cloth away and stared at the image. It was a hallway, dark, dimly lit, stretching back into impossible depth. At the far end stood a figure, humanoid in shape, but completely blurred. The face looked smeared, like the artist had tried to erase it with trembling hands. The shadows swallowed the corners of the hallway. It looked almost photographic in detail, but more unsettling the longer you stared at it. Ethan was intrigued. When he asked the elderly man running the sale how much it cost, the man narrowed his eyes and said it wasn't supposed to be out. It wasn't for sale. Ethan offered him $100, joking that no painting was that cursed. The old man hesitated, then took the bill and muttered something under his breath as Ethan carried it out. Back home, Ethan hung it on the wall in his home office. It seemed like a cool, slightly creepy touch, something to talk about on video calls. That night, he dreamed of footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing down a hallway that looked disturbingly familiar. The dream ended just before the footsteps reached him. The next morning, he stared at the painting and rubbed his eyes. The blurred figure was a little closer than he remembered. Maybe it was his imagination. Maybe the dream was still messing with him. But the next day, it had moved again, a few feet forward. Still blurred, still faceless, but undeniably closer. Ethan checked photos he had taken when he brought it home. The difference was real. The figure was moving. He stopped sleeping well. Night after night, the footsteps returned in his dreams. At exactly 3:12 a.m., he would wake up in a cold sweat. The house felt colder too. His coffee didn't taste right. His code kept crashing. The lights in the hallway flickered even though the bulbs were new. The air around the painting was heavy, humid, as if it was exhaling something sour. By the fifth night, the figure was halfway down the hallway in the painting. Ethan removed it from the wall and shoved it into his garage. But the next morning, it was back in the office, hanging exactly where it had been. He locked the garage door, checked the security cameras. Everything looked normal, but somehow it returned. Ethan called his friend Sarah, a photographer who had a mild obsession with ghost stories and paranormal lore. She came over and stared at the painting for a long time. She took a photo of it with her phone and showed it to Ethan. In the photo, the hallway was longer, and the figure was clearer, closer. He burned it that night, took it to the backyard, doused it in lighter fluid, and lit a match. It burned easily. He watched the canvas crack and curl into blackened ash. He felt relief for the first time in days. But when he woke the next morning, the painting was back on the wall, completely intact, not a scratch on it. The figure was just a step from the foreground. Sarah was speechless when she saw it. They tried everything. They drove miles out of town, threw it in a river, sealed it in a dumpster behind a locked gate. Each time it came back in the same spot, on the wall, watching. Sarah dug through local records and found that Lydia Mercer had painted over 24 versions of the same hallway, each with a single faceless figure. All of the paintings had vanished after her death. Some had been burned, some lost. All had stories tied to them. People who went missing, people who went mad. Ethan knew then this wasn't a haunted painting. It was a door. Each time he looked at it, it was like letting something through, a small crack widening. The figure wasn't just painted there. It was trying to cross over. He covered the painting with a blanket, but the fabric would be on the floor by morning. He tried locking it in a metal box, but the painting would still reappear in his office, as if mocking him. His house grew colder. The dreams became more vivid. He would wake up with faint bruises, scratches, and sometimes even whispering in his ears. His security cameras always glitched at the exact same time, 3:12 a.m. Sarah stayed over one night to observe. They both heard the footsteps outside the bedroom door. Neither of them dared open it. The next morning, Ethan had 3 long scratches across his chest, fresh and bleeding. The hallway in the painting was on fire now, and the figure had stepped out of it. One night, Ethan woke early, 2:59 a.m. The air was thick, cold enough for his breath to fog. The windows were frosted from inside, and then he heard it, a knock, not on the door, from inside the painting. He sat up slowly, not daring to move too fast. The painting was rippling, like water, and the figure emerged. It stepped out tall, drenched in shadows and static, faceless, its body bending in ways that made Ethan's skin crawl. It raised one hand and pointed at the painting. Ethan turned to look. The hallway was empty now, but inside, far in the distance, was a figure. Small, alone, mouth open in a silent scream. Ethan screamed. He looked back, and the figure was gone. The room was silent. The painting was still. The hallway had depth again. But now, Ethan wasn't in his home anymore. The next day, Sarah returned to check on him. The front door was unlocked. Ethan's phone, wallet, and keys were still on the counter. No sign of struggle, just silence. And the painting, it hung on the wall as if it had never left. The hallway in the painting was longer now, and at the very end, you could just make out a small, screaming figure, trapped in shadow, eyes wide. Reaching out, he burned the cursed painting, but it still hung on his wall.